So this isn't what I usually do. I don't usually do quick little reviews on shows or, what I think about them in this sense. I usually do videos that go over what I think is important of shows or what I think made a show great or what I think is important to talk about or things that aren't talked about enough in my opinion on YouTube about a specific show or just a topic in general. That's what I try to do on this channel. That's why I made it. But something happened with the What If series that kind of made me want to do this. The What If series is a very interesting idea for a show that I think had a lot of promises with it, with the animation, getting the voice actors, and writing with Kevin Feige. With it all, I thought, hey, why not? This is a cool idea, interesting concepts. Who knows what's going to happen? The show had a lot of cool opportunities that it could explore and make the MCU feel more comic booky in ways they couldn't do in live action or didn't want to do. And with the different concepts we were seeing from the trailers, from zombies to Dark Doctor Strange and all this, it was very interesting and I was very engaged. And then I watched the show and I was left disappointed. And the reason may be different than most people. I know some people have problems with the writing. I think a lot of people felt like it was good and just had some parts it could explore upon. But for me, there was one clear issue that disappointed me for the show. And that is that it is not a risk. It is not unique. It is too safe. And we need to talk about that. So let's talk about it. The concept of a what if series is one of the smartest ideas that Marvel has had in a while, and a really cool way of exploring the multiverse, which is definitely what they're pushing throughout Phase 4 for the lesser growing audiences. This is a way of branching comic book lovers and non-comic book lovers to come in and to see what is possible in the MCU. For people who don't know comics that well, this is a great way of easing them into the MCU and having some darker themes. It's also a great way of introducing new characters and things into the MCU, engaging audiences' response. You don't have to do something super risky if you can do it through a TV show like this, an animated one. If people don't like it, you don't have to bring Party Thor back into the world ever again. But if people like Doctor Strange, then you can go ahead and show him again, maybe in a live action format. And this show is a really cool testing ground to see what the MCU can do, and it's something that I am very, very interested in. The problem with the show is very simple. The writing is pretty horrible. The writing in the What If series is not interesting or unique or fascinating enough to keep audiences engaged. No one wants to know a lot of that these stories are telling. Now, that is subjective, and I can admit that. But there are parts of the show that I think could have been way different or way riskier or way cooler, unique. There were a lot of more avenues they could have taken that they didn't. Now, this is very subjective, but this is my opinion on how it comes to they should have handled the What If series. So, ever looking at this, let's go down each episode and talk about them. The Captain Carter episode of the What If show is actually pretty good. It has some cool aspects to it. It changes the story up enough to where I was happy with it. And it had some cool moments in there that I enjoyed. The problem with the episode isn't as much as how this episode is a failure in writing or anything. This episode does a fairly good job of introducing you to the What If universe, and that is important. I think the story they are telling here, the character they chose, and the selection of the episodes that it's in is perfect. This should have been the most boring episode in the What If series, but it is not even close to that. It's actually one of the better ones in the What If show, which is not great because it's not terrific. This is what I would expect the bare minimum, or just as an entryway of introducing me to this what if universe. And this is more and more apparent when we get to Star Panther. Mr. Star-Lord, or Star Panther, or whatever you want to call him, is a character and episode that is probably my least favorite in the entire show. It is very uninspired, very unbelievable, and just doesn't follow through on what it needs to do. The cool thing about the Captain America segment of this show was that it felt very natural for what happened. If Carter got the serum, I believe these were the events that followed. If T'Challa was chosen as Star-Lord instead of that, first of all, he wouldn't have been called Star-Lord. Let's just get that out of the way, okay? He wouldn't have gone through that world because Star-Lord was something that was very specific to Peter Quill. So let's get that out of the way. Thanos wouldn't have stopped his rampage. None of that would have happened. And it's very frustrating when you're watching this as a viewer, because I've seen Black Panther and I've seen the Guardians of the Galaxy films, and it feels very forced. When you see Thanos at the bar, it is such a hard fourth wall break that it is frustrating to watch. And the show just tumbles with this episode in a way that I personally don't enjoy. I think Chadwick Boseman does a great job in it, and it kind of sucks that this was his last role, because I feel like this is a really bad interpretation of the character. Now, the What If show, though, picks itself up a little bit again with number 3 episode, The Dead Avengers. So this one is what if the Avengers basically died. You have Black Widow's death, Clint's death, Thor's death, and it kind of is just like a stumbling of it all. And it's actually pretty cool. This one was very unique and interesting on how it unfolded. This one was very believable in the world that it's set. I like how Nick Fury is like kind of freaking out, but he doesn't know exactly what to do. How Loki's character works in it all. It's actually very fun and enjoyable. The writing in this episode is probably the best in the entire show, I would say. It has probably the best writing, second to the next one. So yeah, second best. But it's still a very enjoyable episode, and I like this one a good amount. They does have some stumbling blocks. I don't believe that the Hulk could die that easily, let's be honest, but they pretty much have nerfed MCU Hulk than they have in the comics. So I guess if MCU Hulk can get punched to death by Thanos, then he can get obliterated by Ant-Man. But in the end, this episode is very fun, with the engaging aspects of Nick Fury being great. The cool ending with Captain America and Captain Marvel being like the new Avengers. That's really cool. It's a good idea. Good job, whoever wrote that. And then the entire rest of the episode feels very natural. I enjoy this. This is the most probably realistic episode in the entire show. And I use realistic as a form of most realistic in the universe. With that, let's talk about Doctor Strange. Doctor Strange is by far the best episode in the show. Hands down, all the way. This feels natural. It feels really fresh. It's beautiful, and it's heartbreaking. The entire episode with Doctor Strange is incredible, because you see his entire interactions of his loss for and love of this one person, and his constant attempts to try to bring her back. The Groundhog Day effect, as I like to call it, feels very fresh here, which is surprising since that's been going on for a long time now. This episode is really heart-wrenching as you see all the pretty animations and what he's willing to do to get this person back. It shows what can happen when absolute power and sadness and sorrow can take over a person. It's quite tragic. And as we watch the episode unfolds and you see Strange versus Strange, that is a really cool twist ending to a very cool overall feeling to the episode. The show to this point has always had like, and now we're back to where we used to be, or things end up okay. This is the first episode where the universe dies. Everyone dies. And when you see Christine looking at him and he's just this infested demon, that was heartbreaking. And as he cried for the Watcher to help him, first of all, it's cool that Doctor Strange saw him. And second of all, it was amazing to see just everything go to black. In the end, this is the best episode by far, and it has a lot of emotional depth to it that it actually surprised me. This episode surprised me, and when I watched this episode, I was like, wow, there's actually a lot of room for this show to go. This is what I want to see, you know? So you had the first one, a good intro. Second one, a horribly written episode. A third one, a kind of cool mystery realistic episode. And in this one, an emotionally grasping episode. So far, the show's actually pretty good. It never loses its hype again. And that is especially because of the next 3 episodes in this show. Zombies episode is one that I think a lot of people were excited about when going into the show, and I think more people thought it'd be towards the end. I liked how it was towards the middle, kind of cool. But the problem with this episode is it is too slow. Too slow for the episode. As you're watching the show and trying to understand what has happened, what is going on, certain parts are cool. Seeing the Avengers basically just get wiped by this virus is neat, but one of my problems with it is the overall just feel of it. It isn't exciting. Like, I'm sorry, it's not an exciting episode. There is no tension here because first of all the characters you enjoy except for Spider-Man are dead. So that is the first thing to understand. The second is the weird Vision plot twist in the middle of it also feels unrealistic and confusing, and just overall as you are watching the show, this episode feels like a big step back, but it also just feels confusing and boring. The only interesting character is Spider-Man, and strangely enough, Hope Pym. She's pretty interesting as her relationship with Peter goes, and yeah, there's a lot of cool aspects like that. But there are parts where you're watching and you're like, why didn't she shrink to herself to a minimum atom after, you know, being a giant monster, so she's not a huge problem for the team to face, you know? And it's a bunch of that, just like, okay, and it's not very intense. So overall, this episode was not a huge success, and it kind of just follows up with Killmonger. And the Killmonger episode, well, okay, cool. Then we get to Party Thor, and Party Thor is such a weird concept and so dumb. Like, who was writing this show and said, you know, we have all these cool concepts, Doctor Strange being, you know, evil, we have these zombies, you know, even if zombies wasn't handled terrifically, it's still a really interesting idea, you know, and T'Challa being Black Panther, Star-Lord, that's also an interesting idea that just wasn't executed well. But who thought, what if Thor was an only child? I don't think that's believable for the show. I don't think it's a smart idea for the show. It's too boring. It's not a fleshed out concept. And when a lot of people heard about this, I knew of a lot of people who just weren't interested in it at all. I also don't understand why Loki is just suddenly a chill dude. Why? I just don't get it. Anyway, the overall feeling of this episode is that, oh, they don't care. It feels lazy, and it feels like, to me, an attempt to just fill an episode. The fact that they left this episode in and not the one with Gamora and Tony is actually quite shocking. And then the Party Thor leans into the Ultron episode. Now, the Ultron episode is actually pretty cool. I was a little disappointed for one reason that isn't the show's fault. I was watching a YouTube video and I scrolled past one and it had Ultron eating a universe, and I thought it was Galactus, and so I watched the episode, and it wasn't. So that's not like the show's fault. That was just me expecting Galactus and not getting what I wanted. So not the show's fault there. But overall, this episode's actually pretty cool. The fact that Ultron just kills Thanos immediately is pretty dope. I think the overall feel of the episode is really neat, how dark and grim it is. Natasha and Clint's like vibe of the show is really good and realistic. Seeing like Clint just like, I'm tired of fighting. Like, even if we won, everyone is dead. Like, what's the point anymore? And I think that was really cool. And it was really cool to see Natasha fighting for something. Like, she was just so hardened by this. And the whole algorithm thing was pretty cool. And then with the eventual, we got to see the Watcher and Ultron break into it. And we did get the most memeable line of the show, which kind of frustrates me in something else. But the overall feel of this episode is more of what I wanted from the show. I wanted more dark dystopian futures. I wanted more interesting character developments and seeing different sides of characters. This show was at its best when it wasn't just, oh, these are our characters that we know, but they're just a little different, right? Something a little different about them. The show was at its best when we saw characters that we know acting completely different than what we used to know them by, and the emotional aspects. So seeing Thor become a party person isn't really that interesting, because it's like, oh, this is Thor if he didn't grow as a person. Who wants to see that? But seeing Doctor Strange get consumed by grief, right? Seeing Ultron win and Natasha have to go this emotional struggle. Seeing Captain Carter and how she is very similar to Steve, but she's also more confident than Steve is, at least in the beginning. We see all these interesting things, and we see how Nick Fury is the same badass that we always knew he was, and he just doesn't give up no matter what the scenario is. The point is that the show is coolest when it takes aspects and it fleshes out its characters better. When it's fleshing out its characters, the show is so much better. I'm not watching it to see Party Thor or zombies or Killmonger. The same Killmonger. He's literally like just Killmonger. It's the same thing. It's just the same thing. And it all ends with, what if the Watcher breaks his oath? Now, the Watcher has been a character I actually like throughout the show. I really like the shots of just scenes of the show with him watching behind. I think that's real cool. And seeing him choose the characters was pretty cool too. And overall, I was very happy with it. He predicts things, he sees the futures unfolds, and it's really neat to see that. And this episode wasn't cool though because of the emotional aspect. This one, besides the Doctor Strange one, had fight scenes that made this episode cool, which is probably why I don't have an emotional connection to it like I have the Doctor Strange one. But this one has some really cool combos with seeing like Doctor Strange manipulate the hammers to a bunch of them, seeing Captain and Natasha Romanoff basically both hit their shields at Ultron. The combinations and combo attacks that we saw with this was really interesting and fun to watch, and I enjoyed it. It was fun. It was a cool time. And it felt rushed, but this episode wasn't too bad overall. So as you're watching the show, you're watching it and you're like, yeah, that's pretty cool. That's pretty neat. And it ends creatively too, with Doctor Strange just trapping them in a pocket dimension. That was really cool. And the show ends and nothing really changes. The Watcher goes back. The characters we know go back. It's cool seeing Black Widow didn't have to go back to her crappy reality. But it doesn't change a core aspect of the show. And that we don't care about anything at the end. Nothing really matters at the end of this show. And if I'm right, this show is canon. So that means the multiverse can't get destroyed. So Ultron could never win, really. But overall, the show has a lot of interesting aspects of being creative, being fun, engaging, but it also has so many bad writing aspects to it that it makes it hard to enjoy. If someone told me they were thinking about watching this, I would literally just tell them watch the Doctor Strange one, maybe the Dead Avengers one, and then just watch the Ultron episodes. That's really all you need, or all you want to enjoy. The Dead Avengers one isn't really needed to understand the overall concept of the show. The show is just not written in an engaging way, and it feels like a missed opportunity to really develop these characters more. This show could have been a way to making the characters fun, engaging, and us understanding them better. But instead, it became a funny, drunk, what if happened moment. And that's not why I wanted to watch it. Now, to be fair, this has kind of been a hard bash on the show overall. When I did all my add-ins to ranking for them, I averaged a 5.3 out of 10 for the show. And most of the time, anything that's 5 or below is not worth watching for me. Or 5 is like, I'll watch it, but I'll never watch it again. It had no real impact on me. And that's how I feel with it. Doctor Strange, that one had an impact on me. That one was very good. I enjoyed that. The rest of the show was a lackluster in comparison. And while I have been bashing on the show, I know there's a season 2 coming, and I want season 2 to be better. Because I love the art style. The art style is really cool. I love the fight scenes. Great job on that. I love Doctor Strange. Make all your characters as engaging as that. If season 2 can take the more interesting story ideas that we saw Nando versus Planes do in his video, or just something like that, it can be a lot more fresh, fun, and engaging. Overall, the show is a disappointment for me, and the potential of it is there. So I hope in the future we can see it done better. Thank you guys for watching. I don't usually do rants like this. This was just literally me just talking to y'all. I have my Merlin episode coming up. Why the Adventures of Merlin is Loved is going to be out soon. I will have it done by the end of October, hopefully. It might get pushed a little bit to November, but I think October is still on the books for it. So if you guys have any other requests for anything I should do, any of my long, unnecessarily long videos I do, then please let me know. If you like this, let me know too. I'll talk to y'all later. Bye.